You look at companies from like you're using your machine learning models to figure out which companies are adopting AI, which companies are getting ROI from it, right? How much are they talking about that? When you look at that, I'm wondering what you're seeing both in Europe. I'd love both your take on Europe.
When someone says, I want to be long AI, what does that mean? Right? It could
Sure,
mean
right.
buying Nvidia and chip stocks, which is of course what's worked so far. It could also mean buying the adopters of the technology, right? Companies that, Steve, you brought up a pretty good example of the industrial base, which is being kind of, underperforming, not really taking in enough technical talent. There's a lot of potential value that could be realized there, right? That kind of old economy play. AI has the potential to unlock a lot of value. We talked about, this unstructured data revolution, which is like when we invented the Excel spreadsheet, we are now able to take structured data like time series and such, and now do analytics on it and get value out of it. However, as you pointed out, Steve, a lot of the value that corporations have internally is unstructured data, which hasn't really been accessible. But now with AI, we can now unlock that. So that becomes like a really interesting angle. If you look at the world and saying, I just want to be long AI with regards to the infrastructure builders, then yeah, just buy US stocks, aside from ASML and TSMC and some of the other Korean and Taiwanese hardware producers, that's where all the action is. But if you're willing to say, you know what, I'm willing to now consider second order beneficiaries of AI, right? Thinking of industrial companies or services businesses that could potentially benefit from the progress that we mentioned around Claude Code and the expansion of those tooling into, kind of the Codework suite into like, Excel plugins and, legal services and wealth management, right? That could be really interesting. And when you think about it that way, Sonu, you're spot on, which is, Europe doesn't have, aside from any ASML, any exciting, AI first orders, but like there's, huge industrial base, really strong brand equity, a lot of customer relationships, and quite frankly, their valuations are cheap.